North Carolina can be a wonderful place to live because, like, where else could you go hiking next to whitewater rapids with your dog? Grab a beer if you wanted to, all in one place. Is pretty cool. Pretty cool. But today I'm going to give you 13 reasons why you should never move to this place. And if you still want to move here after this video, well, maybe this is a pretty good spot for you. But also, there's one giant misconception about the state you need to know. So it's not technically new. I'll share that a little bit later on. But here are 13 new reasons why you should never move to North Carolina. Now, before we even begin, you're probably wondering, why now? What prompted this specific video? Yesterday, I got a call from a lady who's moving from Alberta, Canada, and the story she told me is something I hear so often from people, whether they're moving internationally from Canada or Australia or the UK or Germany, all over the world, I get calls. Or whether they're moving from California or New York or Florida, which are a lot more common. And her story was that, in her words, Justin Trudeau has absolutely ruined Canada. Taxes are up, crime is up. It's hard to even live there. And even if you make good money, you'll never be able to afford a house. And North Carolina is pretty much the exact opposite of all of those states and countries and some of the difficulties they're going through right now. And so this, you need to, especially if you're gonna make that big of a trip, you need to know what to expect. And so this is gonna give you the new reasons why North Carolina just might not be for you. Now, when I say North Carolina, we gotta make an important distinction which North Carolina we're talking about. Are we talking about the mountains? Are we talking about the coast? Are we talking about rural, out in the middle of nowhere? Or are we talking about the big cities like Raleigh or especially Charlotte? Actually, where I am right now. North Carolina has so much to offer and so many different feels depending on where you are. And so it really has something for everyone, whether you're looking to be out in nature all day, every day, or whether you're looking for a hoppin' city life that always has stuff going on and walkable day-to-day living. It's got something for everybody. And so first, when you're comparing different places to live, you got to make sure inside of North Carolina you're actually comparing where you want to live. So living here, there's going to be a few specific issues that can really impact your quality of life that might not have been the case a few years ago, including taxes, but also your cost of living, your cost of going out to eat, getting drinks, getting groceries, the homes themselves. As a lot of people have come in from other areas, it's driven up many, many different costs, with one of the ones that has actually surprisingly gone down here is taxes. Now, taxes, especially income tax in North Carolina, is higher than many states, but it's also lower than many others. And so I'll let you compare for yourself. But compared to Florida, Florida's zero, Texas is zero. I'm out of breath. I think Penny is too. Nah, she's just sniffing. But compared to zero, we're gonna be higher. Now, compared to my clients that are moving from California or from New York, where they were paying, on the sliding scale, 10% or more, then you're saving significant amounts of money here because our income tax is only 4.5%. Now, one thing that's really interconnected with cost of living is the housing market. And in North Carolina, it's pretty crazy because we get about 30,000 people a month that move to the state. Charlotte alone gets 117 people per day, according to a recent study. And so everything's just grown like gangbusters, which is really exciting because there's this optimism in the air of like something's always going on, everything's growing, everything's doing really well, even when the rest of the country might, like Florida, the real estate market down there is in the toilet right now. And here it's, prices just are steadily increasing and appreciating, which is great for homeowners. But also if you're trying to get your first home here and you're coming from a state that is equivalent or, even cheaper, that can be a little bit discouraging. And if you're coming from a state that's a lot more expensive, it will still be way cheaper because we're right at the national average cost, at least in Charlotte. Raleigh's gonna be more expensive, but also there are many areas outside the city by about an hour, and also in the mountain towns and out in rural North Carolina, where you can still find great starter homes for under $200,000. I actually negotiated a deal for one of my clients yesterday, and he's super excited to get into that one. It's a great house, everything's new in it, all brand new. Now this leads me on to point number 3, which is the way that the locals feel about newcomers has changed a lot, because it used to be especially 20 years ago, people were pretty excited to have new people in town because North Carolina was not growing the way that it's growing now. And then it started to grow and grow faster and grow more, and now it's grown so much that we have a word for when we meet somebody that's actually from North Carolina. We call them a unicorn because you never meet them, and when you do, it's crazy, like meeting a unicorn. But many people, you'll see it sometimes in the comments on YouTube, are not jazzed and not very excited that there are people that are moving here. And I can't say I've ever seen or heard of any sort of confrontation or anything in person, but sometimes, especially on channels like mine, you will see nasty comments from time to time saying, you know, Charlotte's full, North Carolina's full, try South Carolina. Then the South Carolina people will say South Carolina's full, try North Carolina. And I was talking with one of my clients recently because they got some renovations done to their kitchen, and I swung by to drop off a thank you gift and see the renovations. And this came up in conversation actually, because they're originally from the Carolinas, moved up to New York, moved back down here, and they hadn't heard or seen anything about that. And so it was very surprising to them. But I mean, I'm in the industry, so I see a lot more than some people do, I guess. Now, speaking of people moving here, one of the biggest drivers that has honestly changed a lot in the last few years that's causing people to move down here, particularly to Charlotte, is banking and jobs in general, but especially banking, tech, healthcare, because we have such a strong sector, such a strong business environment here. And so a lot of people are getting jobs here, and I think that's going to continue. One, because that's what all the analysts and researchers say, but also just intuitively think about it. If you can pay an analyst, you know, $150,000 and they feel very poor in New York, and you can pay them half that and they feel very well off in Charlotte, and you're a business that has dollars they're going to spend, you know, but big bank, we got a lot of big banks here, they're going to keep moving analysts down here, and that's what they've been doing for the last 10 years or so, which has been one of the catalysts that started a ton of the growth. And I think it's also going to be one of the things that continues a lot of growth too. But it's also not just banking. In addition to banking, I wrote it down so I wouldn't forget anything: professional services, tech, manufacturing, education, healthcare, and I just missed my step there, but we're living, it's okay, and banking. And so the result of that has been we've seen our unemployment rate in North Carolina as a whole, and especially in Charlotte and Raleigh, stay way below the national average. So I pulled the numbers this morning just to get updated numbers for y'all. Compared to the national average, which is 4.2%, we're down at 3.6. We're over half a point. We're 60 bips below the national average, which is particularly right now, that's a pretty big difference. Now, one of the things that everybody has questions about, which is safety and crime, and I've actually got a local here that I just met that we're going to interview for safety and crime. Well said. So one of the most common questions I get all the time is, how safe is North Carolina? How safe are the different cities within the state? And how does it compare to other areas that either you're living currently or you're familiar with? And I've got some data for you. So North Carolina has a little bit higher crime rate than the national average, but a lot lower than many other states that people like to move here from. And I'll give you all the data on the screen here in a second. But first, North Carolina's average is 405 per 100,000 residents, as opposed to the national average of 381. Now, this is still a lot lower than other states and cities that people are coming from. It's less safe than Florida, but safer compared to New York and California. And here's all the major cities compared to the averages for New York City, Los Angeles, and Miami, with the two largest cities by a mile being Charlotte and Raleigh coming in second. Now, one of the things when you see all these numbers you gotta take into account is this is all pulled from the FBI's national stats, which they go through and make sure all the data is good and clean it up and make sure that there aren't duplicates and that sort of thing. So there's about an 18-month to 2-year lag behind these stats. And so especially with some of the headlines you've probably seen in New York and Toronto and many other cities, it might be that Charlotte's a whole lot safer and North Carolina's a whole lot safer than some other places, but I'll leave that up to you to decide. So another question I get all the time is, what is the healthcare like? How good is the healthcare? Well, according to US News, North Carolina is ranked 15 in quality of healthcare and 24 in overall healthcare. And one of the things that most people don't realize that you need to take into account is this is also super dependent on where you live in the state. So for instance, Charlotte and Raleigh both are huge hubs. Charlotte has a lot more healthcare, whereas Raleigh is known for really good specialists and some of the best experts in the country when it comes to specialty care. And Charlotte's more known for having more doctors so you can get seen quicker, especially in an emergency situation. So that's one of the reasons why personally I chose to live in Charlotte, was because if I'm going to a specialist, I got time. I can drive or take a ride or something. But if I need emergency care right away, that's important, right? You can't wait if it's an emergency. And so I wanted to be somewhere that would be safer in that regard. But both have excellent healthcare. And I do actually know a lot about this because my girlfriend is in medical school and is gonna be a doctor very soon. So I've learned a ton from watching her go through school and hearing things about all the local hospital systems. So now that we covered healthcare, let's talk about something that I'm experiencing right now, if you can't tell by being out of breath and all sweaty, and that's the climate and the environment here. It is the end of summer right now, and so it's pretty warm, it's pretty humid, and the weather, for the most part, is pretty similar throughout the state, but there are a few really key differences you need to know about that I'll get into here in just a second. But first, let's talk about how it's similar before we get into how it's different. So how is it similar? So all of North Carolina has very similar temperature ranges, at least for the high temperature. So I'm out of breath, so I'm gonna just pause for a second. During the summer, basically the entire state has highs averaging between 85 to 90 degrees. And during the winter, it'll have a high averaging between 50 to 55 degrees, depending on where you are. And there are exceptions to that. So for instance, the cold weather will get a little bit lower on the low end. The highs will be similar, but the low end, you'll get down around and below freezing in the western part of the state, whereas the eastern part of the state, especially along the coast, is gonna be a little bit more temperate. It's also gonna be more humid on the eastern end of the state during the summer, and it's gonna be a lot drier on the western end of the state, especially in the mountains. It's just gonna be cooler, which makes sense, higher elevation, more inland, more insulated. But one of the big things that nobody talks about is there are certain parts of Charlotte that are prone to power outages. And I know that Raleigh also has issues with this, and it's many times not storm related. It's only very limited pockets of those cities. And many other areas, like for instance, where I live and just a couple, I have no issues. Couple miles away, there are some issues. It's usually very small pockets that just have a little bit older grids, but it is something to be aware of that I've not seen anybody talking about. And especially when we get crazy weather, sometimes you will be without power for a few minutes or a few hours. I've never really seen it a day, but anything's possible. Now, another question I get, especially from a lot of people that are moving down here with kids, is what about the schools? And Charlotte and Raleigh both have something that you need to know about their schools. Charlotte has some very, very highly rated schools, some of the best in the state, as well as Raleigh, but Charlotte in particular has one thing different. It's on the border with South Carolina, and so actually some of the highest rated schools in all of South Carolina are within 20 to 30 minutes of uptown Charlotte. Now, one interesting thing I also saw, US News made a list of different states for education, and I saw that North Carolina came in 26 overall for education and 14 for higher education. I'm not sure how much I really trust that list though, because it put Florida as number one, which I thought was kind of weird. But for higher education, we do have some absolutely incredible schools here, including UNC Chapel Hill, Duke, NC State, Wake Forest, App State, Davidson College. We have a ton of great higher education here in the Tar Heel State. But outside of school and work, what about fun things to do? What about the recreation? Is North Carolina a great place to be if you're an outdoorsy person? Yeah? Yeah? I hope this speaks for itself a little bit. We have some of the best outdoors in the country, in my opinion. We've got beautiful big mountains. We've got, cities too. So you got plenty of stuff to do in the city. But, just like you saw at the beginning of this video, I'm currently at the Whitewater Center. They have synthetic whitewater rapids. They've got, I forget how much exactly, but I want to say it's like 70 miles of mountain biking trails here. I think over 100 miles of hiking trails, plus the synthetic whitewater rapids. You can go paddle boarding. You can do all sorts of things here, zip lining, rock climbing. You know, they've got obstacle courses. There's all sorts of stuff to do here, and it's not just here either. Within a couple hours of Charlotte and less than an hour from Asheville, you have Mount Mitchell, which is, I believe, the highest peak east of the Mississippi. It's over 6,800 feet in elevation. And so we have like real hiking here. The mountains are beautiful, especially as you get out towards Asheville and Hendersonville in the western part of the state. And we also have the beach when you get out east. And you know, lots of quaint little beach towns, and you can find some pretty economical property that's, you know, walking distance or close to walking distance from the Atlantic Ocean. Now, if you are an outdoorsy person, or maybe somebody that wants to become an outdoorsy person, please be safe. I say this in all my videos. If you're out in the woods, I have seen bears before. We have alligators in the eastern part of the state. We have snakes, everything you can imagine, cottonmouths, copperheads, all of it. We got spiders, we have lizards, geckos, like really you name it, we got it. And also ticks. I have never had issues with it, and I go hiking just about every weekend. But I know some people that have, and actually a friend of mine did end up getting Lyme's disease in college when he was out here hiking. So just be careful. It's not something anybody here is worried about, because you just learn how to, you know, cope. So if you're out in the woods hiking, I'm near the city, so it'd be unlikely to see a bear here, but I have seen them before. So, you know, have bear bells that look like this, get bear spray, looks like this, learn how to properly use it. If you're comfortable with a firearm, carry an appropriately sized firearm, because it's better to be safe than sorry. Now, one of the biggest things that people always ask about, because you see it in movies, you see it in TV, you don't know if it's really real, and it is, or at least it was, and that is Southern hospitality. We like to sit on wraparound porches and drink sweet iced tea. If you drink unsweet tea, you will be disowned by the natives. And you know, we enjoy a slower pace of life and really connecting with people. And it's something I really love about this state. And I can say that even in the 3-4 years that I've lived here, I've seen it change a lot, because we have so many people that are coming from the Northeast. So if you are moving down here from the Northeast, my only personal ask is please smile, wave, make conversation with the neighbors, and everybody will thank you for it. Most of all, me, because I am a friendly person. I love friendly people. And so if that's you too, come on down. We got plenty of room for you. Goodness, sometimes I realize I picked up a Southern accent living here. And the only thing I will add on Southern hospitality is there's one weird thing, and that is when you're on the road, you see people road rage here all the time. It's crazy. Not like, you know, out of control dangerous, but you'll see people honk and flip you off and, you know, yell profanities. And it's something that it honestly happened more down here than in New York, because I used to live in New York. And so a lot of people will blame New Yorkers and, you know, people from New Jersey and Connecticut and, you know, New England area for that sort of behavior. Except I don't know if I buy it, because living up there, it never happened. Living down here, it happens probably once a month where I'll see something like that. Don't flip people off. If you're really disappointed, give them a thumbs down. It's still kind of a move, but you know, sometimes you got to communicate with people when they're not being, not displaying acceptable behavior on the road. Now, some people, I would never do this personally, but to all you brave folks out there that have done this, I commend you, that move down here pretty much blindly without having visited before. And if you're brave enough, go for it. I would not be. It's one of the reasons why I moved here, is because I've lived over a dozen different cities, dozen different states. And then when I came here, it was so different and I loved it so much, I decided to stay, leave my corporate job, and just help people move here. But for the people that do decide to move here without having visited before, I always get the question, you know, what's the best area? Where should I move? What's going to be the best value that's safe and great? And, you know, all these things. And it really depends on two factors. One is going to be what you're looking for, because we have a lot of different areas that are great depending on what you're looking for. If you want endless suburbs and you want someplace that'll be nice and you got, you know, money to burn, Raleigh's probably a great option. If you want something that's going to have a real city and it's really, you know, happening, a little bit younger, you know, city with lots of young professionals and people that are, you know, going out and making it happen and looking to make friends and start a new life and a new chapter of life, then Charlotte will also be a great option for you that might be a better fit. If you're looking for something that'll be small town, North Carolina has a million small towns, and if you're looking for the mountains and you still want to be near somewhat of a city, Asheville is going to be the way to go. And then of course Wilmington, if you're looking for a beach city or beach town, and it really just depends on what you're looking for. But within all those areas, there's so much contextual knowledge that goes into it. Obviously I can't cover it all in this video, but again, reach out anytime. I'd be happy to help you find a great area for you. And now for the most dangerous topic of this entire video, especially with the election coming up, is gonna be politics. North Carolina is very, very diverse when it comes to politics. In many of the rural areas, they are very, very red. In many of the city areas, they are very, very blue. And there's exceptions on both sides. So like for instance, Wilmington is very red. There are also some rural areas, especially in the eastern part of the state, that are very blue. And the one thing that all these areas have in common, in my experience, is people just want you to be respectful. You know, if it's somebody that you see that you disagree with, be respectful of them and to them. If it's somebody that you see that you agree with, cool, go make a friend. But one of the things that I've seen from everyone on all ends of the political spectrum is if you are moving here to get away from policies that created an environment that you don't want to live in anymore, then please leave those policies where you came from and not bring them with you. And don't shoot the messenger. I just see that in the comment section literally every day. Now, as I promised earlier, there's some misconceptions about the state that we need to set the record straight on, particularly because it's probably one of my favorite things about this place, and that is the topography. So you can see, we've been going up and down, and I'm in Charlotte, which is one of the more flat areas in the state. There's topography here. I'm, believe it or not, in the middle of all these woods. I'm 15 minutes from the middle of uptown Charlotte, like the super, super tall skyscrapers in big city. I'm only about 15, 20 minutes from there, depending on traffic. And that's true of most of the city. You can get pretty much anywhere in 20, maybe 30 minutes, depending on how traffic is and where you're coming from, where you're going to. But the topography, as a result, people think that sometimes they're just in the middle of nowhere with nothing anywhere nearby, and that can't be further from the truth for one very important reason. And that is when you have this roll of the land like this, like that creek back there, and this steep hill, none of this can ever really be developed without it being very expensive. And that's not going to be cost effective anytime soon. And so as a result, even when you're in the city, you'll see a lot of areas that have little parts that are undeveloped, little strips of land, and it can kind of shield you, so you can be literally next to a Walmart and have no idea. If you've ever been to Belmont, North Carolina, which is a suburb on the west side, you know this, because there's this little strip of trees that are between one of the main thoroughfares and then the Lowe's and Walmart, and this is big shopping center. But you'd never guess it if you're just driving along the highway. You would think that you're in basically the middle of nowhere, and that's just not the case. Personally, I love it because Charlotte was ranked as one of the cleanest cities and the greenest cities. In fact, #1 cleanest city in the entire US. And I love it. I love all this. I hope it never changes. And it's a lot of green, a lot of clean, all thumbs up from me. But you can be really close to stuff and have absolutely no idea sometimes. Now, one quick note, should you just throw caution to the wind, you're like, this sounds great, I'm gonna go ahead and just move to North Carolina? No, at least not until you have a chance to visit this place and discover some of the areas that might be best for you. And I would be happy to help you find some of the best areas and a home that would match your needs and goals. I consult with people from all over the world and the city and the country every single day, and I'd love the opportunity to also help you find the right place to call home for this next chapter of life for you. So call me, text me. You can also email or scan the QR code and book a time directly on my calendar, and I can't wait to see you on the other side. Now, everybody moves to either Charlotte or Raleigh, but people that love Charlotte hate Raleigh, and people that love Raleigh hate Charlotte. So before you visit either of them, watch this video I put together here that breaks down all the differences to help you see which might be your favorite. My name's Lucas Roller, your realtor, to find the perfect house here in the Carolinas. And as always, until next time, hope to show you around.